Everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, sequel to Ghostbusters Afterlife, sequel to the original two Ghostbusters movies. And yeah, this one is, I had a lot of fun with it. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas that they put in here, but I will say it has its share of issues, you know, if you can't tell by, you know, a bunch of other critics that you might have seen by now. Yeah, this one, basically we pick up a year later. We have the same crew from Afterlife, and they're now in New York, and the Ghostbusters as an entity, I guess, is very well known, very well established. Even, you know, they're drive-by chasing this ghost throughout the city, causing all kinds of destruction, and even the cops are like, just let them handle it, they got this, you know. So like, the Ghostbusters are obviously a known entity in this world, and if this movie does anything really well, or at least a lot, it does it a lot, is world building. This thing establishes the world of Ghostbusters as it is presently, and, you know, potentially as it will be in the future, probably depending on like how well this thing does at the box office. I imagine they set up quite a few things, and I think that's really my only biggest flaw with this movie, is that throughout the entire thing it's clear, like you can almost like write it down as like a checklist on paper. They are just setting up concept after concept after concept for potential sequels and spin-offs, and I'm sure streaming television shows and all kinds of different things. It seemed obvious to me that, like, okay, they introduce the Ghostbusters other headquarters that that Ernie Hudson has established, and he's funding these other scientists who also are Ghostbusters, or at least they're like ghost paranormal scientists who are working on different technology, and they're scanning all these different like haunted artifacts, and you know, they play a big part in unleashing our main villain in this movie. But that entire segment, this entire headquarters, all this stuff that they show, the technology where they can extract a ghost from an object, all of that stuff feels like it was only there because they're like, that's gonna be a TV show. That's a TV show right there. It's gonna be like a 6-episode miniseries on, I don't know, Netflix or Hulu or something, and like, that's what it is. You're gonna follow these Ghostbuster engineer scientist people, and they, you know, they come across different haunted objects every episode, and that's what it is. And then they also establish Kumail Nanjiani. He shows up, and he has a much bigger role than I thought he would. He shows up and he has like the main haunted object of this movie, which, by the way, world building wise, again, this movie establishes that seemingly all ghosts have an object that they are haunting, and that's like their anchor in this world, which I don't believe was ever a thing in the other Ghostbusters movies. So it is kind of a new thing that they're establishing here. You know, I don't think it's anything lore breaking or anything, but it is an interesting idea. You know, like, you could potentially just find whatever the object that the ghost is holding on to, you know. There's a prominent character in here who's holding on to a pack of matches, you know, and I guess you could extract the ghost from the object, and that's what the scientists do. So anyways, Kumail Nanjiani's character, they introduce more world building lore here that, again, feels like it's for a different show or a different spin-off movie, because what they end up establishing here, and yeah, we're gonna go full spoilers, what they end up establishing here is that his grandparents were like essentially an ancient version of the Ghostbusters, where they had pyrokinesis powers, like, yeah, like they're moving fire with their minds, and they were able to trap this ghost a long time ago, and so now he has these powers, and he's able to use his fire powers in order to help stop this frozen empire ghost guy, this ancient god. You know, it's always an ancient god, right? So again, you know, now we're being shown someone like essentially a superhero. Like, that's what he's playing. He's essentially a pyrokinetic superhero in this movie. And again, it feels like these are kind of cool concepts, you know, like an ancient version of, you know, obviously cultures around the world have done all kinds of things with spirits. So like, you know, it feels like it makes sense in this world. Like, yeah, that would happen, right? But also it feels like something that's for its own franchise, like its own spin-off series. It's going to be like its own thing. Like, we're going to deal with, I don't know, other spiritual powered people that can essentially be superheroes. Like let's, you know, if we're not beating around the bush here, they're superheroes, right? So yeah, and that kind of feels like everything in this movie is just that, you know, like, and don't get me wrong, I like the cast from Afterlife. I like seeing the OG cast, obviously. I like some of the new people they put in here. A lot of the humor works. The ghost design really works. You know, like, we get some classics like Slimer. We get some new ones like this cool dragon thing that's flying through the air. All of your Ghostbuster trappings, I think, really work. But this movie just feels like its only main job was to expand the world, open the doors for potential spin-offs, and it kind of ended up making the main bad guy, like the main like frozen ghost, kind of feel like an afterthought, you know, because he doesn't really show up until the third act. And then of course, you know, the heroes win, big surprise, right? But you know, it does kind of make it end up feeling like just an afterthought, whereas the movie's real goal was the first 2/3 of the movie, where we're just establishing all of this stuff, and it's all going to be stuff later that we're going to use down the line, you know. So if I had one criticism about the movie, really it's just that, is that like I like the ideas, I like the things they're showing me, but it doesn't quite feel like it's a, you know, it's like I'm watching a movie that's not really about this movie, it's about other things, you know. You could almost call it a Marvel effect, maybe. You know, I'm sure some people will throw that out there. It's kind of a Marvel effect, you know. We're like, this is for other stuff, isn't it? This isn't really for this. But that's how I feel. But yeah, having said all of that, like I said, I like the characters. You know, like, a lot of the humor works, especially when it's Paul Rudd, and they work on the family dynamic, and I feel like they were able to like let that really be a central going thing of like the afterlife, or afterlife family kind of being more concretely established, and Paul Rudd being essentially the stepdad of that family, and, you know, trying to connect with these two kids. But yeah, you get the OG cast in there. Some of them get a lot more screen time. Some of them, you know, Bill Murray's essentially a cameo. You know, he shows up twice, but other ones are like more prominent in the movie. You know, stuff like Patton Oswalt, he's a cameo. He shows up once, but he's got a great scene. You know, he's good at explaining the whole, you know, he's the exposition guy in this movie. You know, you always have to have an exposition guy. You go to some professor, some guy who's studied all this. He's that guy. He's the one who does that. But yeah, this other thing, like the girl that Finn Wolfhard was, you know, kind of having a thing with in Afterlife, she shows up, and I will say she's probably given the least amount of stuff to do, because I don't know if there was like some editing going on here, and like they forgot to establish something, and they kind of just threw in a line in the, you know, in the post-production of it. They're like, oh, just have audio put in like a line here. Like, she's just there in New York, you know, and they have to come up with reasons why everyone's there in New York. Like, even Podcast, the sidekick guy who was the kid who was like doing all the podcast stuff, he's also in New York, you know. Like, so like everyone's just there for various reasons, you know, but they can't say that, you know, they don't all live together. So it's like, okay, well, we want to bring all of them back, but we want to set in New York. So like, okay, so the girl just kind of, she's interning here, and we're just going to throw that line away. We're not going to ask any more questions, because we established that this was like a secret thing, and yet somehow Finn Wolfhard was told that she's interning here. But did he not tell anyone else about this secret location? Okay. And then Podcast is just like, I guess he's lying to his parents, and he told them he's at space summer camp, but actually he's working at the bookshop, or I guess the haunted bookshop. Instead, he's working with Dan Aykroyd's character. My point is, there's definitely a level of like, you gotta just let this movie, you gotta go with the logic of it, right? Like, okay, they clearly just wanted all the cast here, they gotta come up with reasons why they're all in New York, but adversely, it feels like a lot of those characters did not have the screen time to justify them even being there, right? Like, honestly, those two, Podcast and the girl, they're so barely in this movie that I don't know why they are in this movie, you know? Like, in fact, you could have given more time to our real main characters and it would have felt a little bit more tight. Like Patton Oswalt, maybe Patton Oswalt didn't need to be in this movie. He was a cool cameo, like, you know, he does this Patton Oswalt thing, but maybe he didn't need to be in the movie. Maybe you could have had someone else deliver all this information. That way we can spend time. Like, if you're going to have the OG cast and the Afterlife cast, and the OG cast is going to get more screen time this time, it feels like you need to have cut a couple other things out. Like, Kumail Nanjiani, he's cool in his role. He's really funny, obviously. Like, that's, you know, you hire a bunch of funny people, you're going to get funny stuff. But, you know, again, it feels like the only reason he was here was to establish something for a spin-off or something. So as cool as it was, you know, like, if I'm thinking just narrative, I'm like, okay, you probably could have cut him. You could have cut the kid and the podcast kid. You could have cut Patton Oswalt out of the movie. You could have just made it the OG cast and the Afterlife cast, and now they're all in New York and they're dealing with like family stuff. And then, you know, and then you could do like, oh, and then, but they also have like a ghost laboratory where they're working on newer technology. Like, you know, like, that could have been the one thing that you throw in there as like a potential spinoff, you know? But instead, they're like, but what if we just threw everything in there? What if every single character came back and we have like 3 or 4 different spinoffs, you know, occupy, you know, like, kind of, ooh, what's the audience going to be interested in? Which one of these things deserves its own show or movie, you know? Let's see what else. Oh, there was also, they do this interesting thing here. So in the past movies, we have obviously seen, you know, humans who are ghosts, you know, and, you know, they have shown that directly, like, okay, this was clearly a human being. Whereas other ghosts are more like monsters, you know, they're essentially like, there's a giant dragon or Slimer. Slimer doesn't seem like he was ever a human being, right? So you do have human looking ghosts, and then you have like demon-y, monster looking apparitions, right? But even the humans, they never talk. Not really, you know, like, maybe they'll make like a couple noises, but they don't like full on have sentences and conversations and talk with the other characters. You know, like, they essentially stay silent. Even when they did that thing with Harold Ramis in Afterlife, he was silent, you know? They have a character in here. It's a ghost teenage girl, and she's a full character, and she's a ghost the whole time, and she's she's having full conversations. And the thing about it, the weird thing is that, like, if you're gonna do that, it kind of brings into question some of what the Ghostbusters is doing, right? Because even she sort of questions it for a second of like, so what happens to us when you put us in the giant wall vault here, you know, when you capture us and you put us in there, like, what happens to us, you know? Like, it's kind of strange to do that, because now it's like, so do we have to start thinking of all these ghosts more like full thinking, conscious human beings instead of just essentially monsters? Because you're kind of opening that door right now by introducing this character. And I think that's really my only, like, I don't know how I feel about this, because now I'm like, do you know, like, I mean, they don't capture her, she ends up, you know, they do the traitor reveal and then she redeems herself, they do the whole thing, oh, like, oh, I'm at peace now, and she fades away, you know, which again, that's another thing, she fades away, there's like another side. So like, I don't know how much, I don't think they've talked about that too much in the franchise before, but like, you have the living world and then you have ghosts, but then even past that there's like another world, like another like afterlife where the ghosts find peace and then they fade off to heaven, question mark. You know, they don't really establish it. They kind of make a joke about it, but like they don't really like you know, talk about that. You know, so as much world building as this movie's trying to do, there are still some things where they're just we'll just leave that vague because we don't want to ask too many questions. You know, like if the ghosts are fully thinking conscious things and they can have full conversations with people, then you have to start questioning what the Ghostbusters are doing. I don't know. You know, like obviously some of them are just monsters, like the giant dragon snake thing, but others, it's just a person. It's a, you know, for all intents and purposes, this is just a human being still, right? So interesting. Okay. But yeah, they do something else, which again, I guess you could say it kind of ties in with the laboratory spin-off they're probably going to try to make. But they do this thing where there's the machine that can extract ghosts from objects, like haunted objects. And our main girl, Phoebe, I think the character's name is, she puts herself in the machine and she extracts her own spirit for 2 minutes. So she's dead, I guess she's dead, right? Like that's what you would call that, I guess, if you take your ghost out of your body and then your body falls down. So I guess she's died, and she's just walking around as a ghost. Now this scene only lasts for like a minute, right? But even that felt like I think the movies are called Flatliners, I think, but like it's a very similar idea of like scientists who like, oh, what if I killed myself very temporarily and then and then, you know, came back and what, you know, I get to see the other side. Like that's basically what happens in this movie for a second. So again, this movie just feels like it has so many ideas and so many concepts, and I do like a lot of them, but none of them really get much time to breathe. The family dynamic is the strongest element, but there's just so much they're trying to do, and you know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. You know, if this movie does well enough, I can promise you that within a couple months they're gonna be like, oh, Hulu has picked up a Ghostbusters TV show. It's gonna be based on the science laboratory. You know, like it feels like a TV show already, you know. So anyways, it's a good movie in the sense that I had fun, but it is narratively kind of a mess. Its pacing is kind of a mess, and again, it feels like a movie that's just here to expand things. It's not here to like be a concise movie on its own. It's just for, you know, setup. You know, we're just here to set up things for other things, you know. We're not really here to be a movie. But having said all of that, even the negative things, I still had fun. I still, like, a lot of the jokes still work for me. You know, I still feel like a lot of people out there, a lot of families are gonna enjoy this movie. They make, you know, it's still ghost-busting action. It's still, the humor's still there. You're gonna get your references and your winks and nods to other things that you know before. You know, so a lot of that is still in the movie. There's still a lot to like, but it does have its problems. So yeah, anyways, that was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Are you gonna watch it? Have you already watched it? Let me know what you guys think about this movie. Let me know what you think the first spin-off of this movie is gonna be. I'll be shocked. I will be shocked if nothing ever gets announced, or like no rumors ever start of like, oh, they're gonna make a spin-off streaming series. Like it feels so primed for that purpose. Like that's, I can see it. So anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.